A man wakes up speaking a language he has never learned. A woman's body manufactures its own alcohol. A boy who feels no pain at all. These are not folklore. They are documented medical case studies, peer-reviewed and verified in journals across the world. The human body is far stranger than most textbooks let on. Counting down the 10 strangest verified medical conditions ever documented. Number 10. Autobrewery syndrome, also known as gut fermentation syndrome. The condition occurs when the natural population of yeast in a person's gastrointestinal tract, usually Saccharomyces cerevisiae or Candida species, becomes so overgrown that it ferments dietary carbohydrates into ethanol inside the body. Affected individuals can become measurably intoxicated, sometimes severely without consuming any alcohol. One famous documented case in 2014 involved a 61-year-old American man who repeatedly registered drunk driving level blood alcohol concentrations. Despite swearing he had not consumed alcohol, hospital testing eventually confirmed that his digestive tract was producing ethanol from carbohydrate meals. He was treated with antifungal medication and a low-carbohydrate diet. Autobrewery syndrome has been used successfully as a legal defense in several drunk driving cases in the United States and the United Kingdom. The condition is extremely rare and difficult to diagnose because most physicians do not initially believe the patient's claim of sobriety. Number 9. Foreign accent syndrome. First medically described in 1907 by the French neurologist Pierre Marie. Foreign accent syndrome is an extremely rare condition in which a patient, usually following a stroke or other brain injury, suddenly speaks with a foreign-sounding accent that is not from any region they have ever lived in. One of the earliest documented cases involved a Norwegian woman in 1941 who, after being injured in a Nazi German bomb blast, developed what struck her neighbors as a strong German accent. The social consequences in occupied Norway were severe. Modern documented cases have included American patients suddenly speaking with British, Russian, or Australian-sounding accents, and Japanese patients speaking with Korean-like intonations. Phonetic analysis has shown that the patients are not actually speaking the foreign language. Their motor speech patterns have been altered by neural damage in ways that listeners interpret as a different accent. The condition is medically real and well documented across approximately 150 published cases as of the mid-2020s. It often resolves over months with speech therapy, though not always. Number 8. Cotard syndrome, also called the walking corpse delusion. First described in 1880 by the French neurologist Jules Cotard. The syndrome is a rare psychiatric condition in which the patient holds the unshakable belief that they are dead, do not exist, are putrefying, or have lost their internal organs. Some patients become convinced they no longer need to eat or drink because they are already deceased. In severe cases, patients have refused food until they came near to actual starvation, the delusion having become self-fulfilling. Cotard syndrome is most commonly associated with severe depression, but it has also been documented in patients with brain injury, encephalitis, and a small number of cases following certain antiviral medications. One particularly striking modern case from 2008 involved a 39-year-old Filipina woman who insisted she could smell her own rotting flesh and demanded to be taken to a morgue. Brain imaging in Cotard patients has shown reduced metabolic activity in regions associated with self-recognition, an emotional response to the body. The condition typically responds to electroconvulsive therapy combined with antidepressant medication. Number 7. Fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, commonly called Stone Man syndrome. FOP is an extraordinarily rare genetic disorder in which the body's connective tissues, muscles, tendons, ligaments, progressively transform into bone. The condition affects approximately 1 in 2 million people worldwide. There are no more than a few thousand confirmed cases in human history. FOP is caused by a single mutation in the ACVR1 gene. Patients are typically born with malformed big toes that signal the diagnosis. As the patient grows, soft tissue injuries, even routine bruises, dental work, or muscle sprains, can trigger the formation of new bone in the damaged area. Over decades, secondary skeletons form alongside the original, eventually fusing major joints and immobilizing the body. The condition is irreversible. Surgical attempts to remove the abnormal bone trigger more aggressive bone growth at the surgical site. The most famous historical case was Harry Eastlack, an American man who died in 1973 at age 39. His skeleton, showing the dramatic secondary bone growth, is preserved at the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia and remains the most studied FOP skeleton in medical literature. In 2006, researchers identified the responsible gene mutation, opening the possibility of targeted gene therapy approaches that are currently in clinical trials. Number 6. Alice in Wonderland syndrome. First named in 1955 by British psychiatrist John Todd, the syndrome is a perceptual disorder in which the patient experiences distortions of size, distance, and time. Patients may feel that their hands are enormous, that doorways are tiny, that the ceiling is descending toward them, or that time has stopped. The condition is named after Lewis Carroll's novel because his fictional descriptions of Alice's body-changing size closely match modern patient reports. Alice in Wonderland syndrome is most common in children and is often associated with migraine, certain types of epilepsy, mononucleosis, and Epstein-Barr virus infection. Some neurologists have hypothesized that Lewis Carroll himself suffered from migraines with associated perceptual distortions, which may have inspired the novel's surreal physical descriptions. The condition typically resolves over weeks to months in pediatric cases, but in adults it may persist or recur in association with chronic migraines. Modern functional MRI studies have shown altered activity in the visual cortex and temporoparietal regions during episodes, consistent with the perceptual distortions reported. Number 5. Hyperthymesia, or highly superior autobiographical memory. First formally described in a peer-reviewed paper in 2006, hyperthymesia is a condition in which the patient remembers an extraordinary number of personal life experiences in vivid detail, often able to recall the day of the week, the weather, and the contents of conversations from any specific date in their past. The first documented case was a woman known in the medical literature as AJ, later publicly identified as Jill Price, who could recall the events of every day of her life since approximately age 14. Subsequent research identified approximately 60 individuals worldwide with verified hyperthymesia. Each can recall personal events from past decades with accuracy of approximately 90% or higher when tested against contemporaneous records. Brain imaging studies have shown that people with hyperthymesia have unusual anatomical features in the temporal lobes and caudate nuclei. The condition is not associated with increased intelligence or with savant-style abilities in other domains. Affected individuals do not perform better than average on standard memory tests for impersonal information such as word lists. Many of those with hyperthymesia have reported that the constant flood of past memories interferes with their day-to-day functioning and makes letting go of negative experiences extremely difficult. The American actress Marilu Henner is the most publicly known person with the condition. Number 4. Congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis, abbreviated CIPA. The condition is a rare genetic disorder, primarily caused by mutations in the NTRK1 gene, in which the patient cannot feel physical pain and also cannot sweat. Approximately 100 to 200 verified cases of CIPA have been documented worldwide. CIPA is far more dangerous than it might initially sound. Without pain sensation, affected children frequently injure themselves without realizing it, biting through their tongues during teething, fracturing bones from rough play, and ignoring serious internal injuries. The inability to sweat means they cannot regulate body temperature properly, putting them at constant risk of hyperthermia. Children with CIPA require continuous caregiver vigilance to detect injuries through visual inspection rather than behavioral cues. Many do not survive past childhood due to undetected injuries, infections, or heat stroke. Research into CIPA has provided important scientific insight into how the human nervous system processes pain, with some pharmaceutical companies pursuing pain management drugs based on the genetic pathway disrupted by the condition. What initially appears to be a beneficial trait, the absence of pain, is in practice one of the most lethal genetic conditions known. Number 3. Capgras delusion. First described in 1923 by the French psychiatrist Joseph Capgras and Jean Ribot-Lachaud, the syndrome is a rare neuropsychiatric condition in which the patient believes that a person close to them, usually a spouse, parent, or close friend, has been replaced by an identical imposter. The patient recognizes the person's appearance, voice, and mannerisms, but the emotional sense of familiarity is absent. They conclude the loved one must be a fake. Modern neuroscience has provided a structural explanation. When a patient with Capgras sees a familiar face, the visual recognition pathway still functions normally. The brain identifies the person's features, but the parallel emotional pathway normally activated by the limbic system is disconnected. The patient sees their spouse but does not feel the emotional reaction they expect to feel. Their brain resolves the cognitive dissonance by concluding that the spouse must be an imposter. The condition is most commonly associated with schizophrenia, dementia, traumatic brain injury, and certain neurodegenerative diseases. Documented cases have included patients who maintained the belief for months, refused to live with their replacement spouses, and sometimes attempted to expose the supposed imposter through elaborate tests. In rare and disturbing cases, the delusion has led to violence against the supposedly imposturing family member. Capgras delusion is one of the clearest examples in psychiatry of how disrupted communication between brain regions can produce profoundly altered subjective experience. Number 2. The case of Tarare. In late 18th century France, a peasant man known only as Tarare was documented by multiple physicians as exhibiting an extreme appetite and consumption capacity, unlike anything in the medical literature before or since. Tarare was described in contemporary accounts as able to swallow whole apples without chewing, large quantities of raw meat including the contents of an entire butcher's bench, live cats, live snakes, and reportedly an entire eel without chewing. During the French Revolutionary Wars, Tarare was recruited by French military intelligence to act as a courier. The plan was that he would swallow encoded documents inside a sealed wooden box, which would pass through his digestive system. He was captured behind enemy lines, and the box was eventually recovered. But the operation was abandoned as impractical. His treating physician Pierre-François Percy documented Tarare's case in detail. Tarare's body temperature was reportedly elevated, his skin loose enough to wrap around his waist when his stomach was empty, and his breath unbearable. He repeatedly visited hospitals seeking help. He died around 1798, allegedly of tuberculosis. After a final period of severe diarrhea, the autopsy reportedly revealed massively enlarged digestive organs and a stomach occupying almost the entire abdominal cavity. Modern medical historians have proposed several explanations including hyperthyroidism, lesions in the hypothalamus, or Prader-Willi syndrome. None is definitive. Tarare's case remains one of the most extraordinary documented individual medical phenomena in early modern European medicine. No modern individual has ever been documented with comparable consumption capacity. And the number one weirdest medical condition: human chimerism. A chimera is an individual whose body contains two distinct sets of DNA that originated from different fertilized eggs. In humans, chimerism most commonly occurs when two embryos fuse very early in development before implantation. The result is a single individual whose cells carry two complete genetic profiles. In some chimeras, the two genetic populations are distributed throughout the body without obvious external signs. In others, the condition produces visible features: patches of skin with different pigmentation, eyes of different colors, or distinct genetic ancestry markers in different tissues. One of the most famous documented cases involved a Washington state woman named Lydia Fairchild. In 2002, when applying for state benefits, she submitted DNA tests to prove she was the biological mother of her own children. The tests returned negative. State authorities accused her of welfare fraud and even briefly considered taking her children away. After months of legal proceedings, additional testing finally revealed that Fairchild was a chimera. The cells in her ovaries carried different DNA than the cells in her mouth, which had been the basis for the original test. Her children were biologically hers. They were the descendants of a twin sister who had never been born as a separate individual, but had instead been absorbed into Fairchild's embryo during pregnancy. Cases like Fairchild's raise extraordinary questions for forensic science, legal paternity, and medical practice. An estimated unknown percentage of people may have undiagnosed mild chimerism, particularly twins who were absorbed in utero. In another documented case, a Boston area man fathered a child whose DNA did not match his own. The genetic father turned out to be his unborn twin, whose cells were the source of his sperm-producing tissue. In another, a kidney transplant recipient was found years after the procedure to have her donor's DNA appearing in her own blood and skin cells. Chimerism complicates ancestry testing, criminal forensic analysis, organ donation matching, and even basic biological identity. You are not necessarily one person genetically. You may be two and never know it. The strangest medical condition is not a rare disease. It is the discovery that the foundational assumption of one body, one genome, one person, is sometimes wrong. 10 conditions. 10 reminders that medicine is in many ways still cataloging what the human body is capable of. Every one of these conditions was once considered impossible until a patient walked into a hospital with the symptoms. Whatever the next strange condition is, it is almost certainly walking around in some clinic right now waiting to be named.